Hello everybody, I'm Diana. Welcome to Build a Quilt. This video is all about the creation of our new mini quilt called the Starflower Mini Quilt. The Starflower Mini Quilt finishes up at just that lovely little petite size of 9 by 9 inches, which makes it perfect for a mat on your table for a hot pad, a large mug rug. Maybe you want to gift some to friends. Maybe you want to make a few and put into a Mother's Day basket or something for Mother's Day, or you want to put it in a basket for a new mom with a nice mug and something to kind of just for her instead of for a baby, or any other kind of gift. Maybe you want to make some for a shower for a wedding for a couple, something like that. You can also hang these on those cute little wire hangers. They will hold those 9 by 9 sizes too, and set it on, say, a sideboard or a table or an end table or a fireplace mantle or anything like that in your home, even a dresser, just to add that beautiful decorative touch. In this video, I'm going to walk through the pattern with you a little bit, show you the segments you're going to make, what it looks like, and at the end, there are 4 small video demonstrations as part of this overall video, and those will be for the half square triangle, the square, the quarter square triangle, and then a seaming video. That shows you how to create each one of the segment pieces. Plus, in the pattern, you get all of the written instructions and all of the diagrams you're going to need, as well as our favorite part of our patterns, or at least you guys say so, the coloring sheet. The coloring sheet is there so that you can get out some crayons or colored pencils and kind of color it and play with what colors you want to use, because you're not tied to the colors that I'm going to show you. And then you can see if you like them before you go and cut your fabric. Maybe you're shopping your stash and you have some things that are in limited supply, so you don't want to cut them until you know they're going to work the way you want them to. Or maybe you want to take then your coloring sheet off to the fabric store and see what fabrics they have that meet those color ranges for you. So that's what our coloring sheet is all about. And I know you all love using it. And so, of course, there is one in this pattern as well as all of our other Build a Quilt patterns. So let me show you real quick a diagram of what the Starflower Mini Quilt looks like. So it is a star pattern, but the way it is layered, it looks like the center is also a blooming flower. That's why I call this the star flower. The green represents what you might see as little leaves popping off of the flower. And then, of course, the white or candlelit color is the background. So let's talk about the pattern for just a moment. Now, I'm going to show you the pattern I printed out. Please forgive me that the colors look awful and not the colors you just saw, because I didn't realize it when I was printing until it was too late that my printer was out of all the different colors to make the right color. So yours will print out with the colors you just saw in that diagram. So this is the written pattern. It shows you this in the colors I just showed you. It tells you that it is the Starflower Mini Quilt and it is a 9 by 9 finished size. Now, this is part of our Quilt Lab series. And if you are a Quilt Lab subscriber for 2025, you will have received your email with your download code in it. If you're not part of the Quilt Lab subscription service, that's okay. You can still get this pattern, and I'll show you how at the end of the video. So here is our video, or here is our pattern. And with all of our patterns, it starts out, if I can get my paper to come apart here. Here we go. This very first page tells you a little bit about me, in case you're interested. You may not be. That's fine too. And then it shows you all the segment pieces you're going to create within the pattern. So you know up front, oh, I'm going to get to make this, and I'm going to get to make this, and I'm going to get to make this. Oh, I've never made that before. So it kind of gives you a preview of what's coming that's going to come together to make your beautiful quilt. And so we have a corner unit, a quarter square triangle unit that goes on the sides, and a quarter square triangle unit that's going to be in the center. And basically the quarter square triangle and this corner unit, which is a couple of half square triangles and squares, are all you're going to do. So really you are using 3 of the most basic quilting segment blocks out there. They're used most often, and we'll talk about why certain ones were used in certain places. So that's your first page. Then you get a general supply list. If you ever have questions about supplies or anything like that, towards the end of the video, I'm going to show you how to get a hold of me, or you can always leave comments in comments below. I love to hear from you. If you leave comments below, I answer them as soon as I see them, and then that can help other people as well. And then there are some instructions, written instructions about creating this particular quilt. And then the first sheet that comes up that truly is of real importance is our fabric sheet. Now, these colors are not the right colors, right? But I'm going to show you, I have some fabrics here that I chose for my mini quilt that kind of matches those colors right there. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So fabric A is the background color, or in this case, it's that candlelight white, which is this color right here. Let me take that back down. So is this color right here for the background. Now, if you're someone that doesn't like using white fabric in a background, that's all right. I chose this color because it is supposed to represent kind of a spring blooming flower. And so I thought white would be better. It gives, I think white, or this candlelit color, gives a nice fresh background to a piece. However, if you want to do it in a different color, I recommend maybe staying with a lighter color, maybe a sky blue or a really light yellow that could represent the sky or the sun or something like that. But remember, my thing for all of you is that you are truly the designer here. So you choose whatever color or fabric that you want as your background. Could be a print, could be a solid. In this case, we've chosen this solid candlelit white color, which is not a stark white. It's a very soft white. All right, fabric B is going to be your dark color, or in this case, kind of a magenta. Now, the piece I chose is a very deep magenta. In fact, it almost matches my shirt today. I didn't realize that. So this is the color I chose. It looks a little plummy in this shot, but what you're going for here, if you're going to do this purple theme, this purplish theme, is something that's deep, pinky red, purpley red, anything like that will work really well. So a deep magenta, a dark color. So if you're not going to use purples, if you're going to go with a whole different colorway, maybe you want to do pinks or actual reds, this is going to be your darkest color. Okay, then fabric C, let's bring this back up. So here we're seeing where our magenta is. It's going to be in your center quarter square triangle, and it's going to be the inner part of the 4 side quarter square triangles. And so that is that. Color C is the medium color, or what I'm calling lavender. And it's these little, what I call the buds or the petals really that are exploding out from the flower out here in these 4 corners. And I chose for this one, I actually chose a very tiny print, and I'll tell you why. Let me bring this up. So I chose this color. It's kind of a reddish lavender, but you could choose a true lavender color if you want more to the purple if you want. I kept these kind of in that reddish purple area for myself because I love those colors in natural flowers. But I chose this tiny print because sometimes the outer parts of your petals of your flowers tend to be where you see some streaking or some veining in them, or maybe your edges are a little crinkled. There's usually something interesting about the outer petals of a flower. So I thought by using a print with a teeny tiny little print on it, that would give this whole overall pattern some movement, some depth, and some texture to it. So anywhere I have shown you a solid, feel free to replace that with a smaller print of your choice, okay? But that's what I chose for my medium color, or lavender. And of course, you could be doing blues, pinks, reds, oranges even. There's beautiful spring orangey flowers. I just got some begonias that are kind of, well, they're kind of like this fabric right here. They're kind of orange and yellow, and they're glorious looking. They look like they're little on fire blooms. They're really pretty. Anyway, we're on to fabric D. And with fabric D, that is your lightest color for your bloom. And that is a lilac color. Let's bring this up. You can see all of these outer parts of the quarter square triangle, and these two parts of the inner quarter square triangle are the lightest color, and those are lilac. Let me bring this back down. And this is the color I chose for it. Again, I chose a solid because it happened that most of my colors in this range happen to be in solids, but you can for sure use a print if you like. So that is the color. So let's look at the colors again so far. I've chosen this candlelit white for my background, this darker magenta for my dark, this medium lavender with the little print for my medium, and this light color is my lilac color. And we have one more fabric, which is fabric E, and you can guess it's the green on here that represents the leaves coming off of the stem. So if you're looking down on the flower and it's blooming out, you'll see little leaves coming out. That's what this represents here in the diagram. And I actually have two, and I'd like for you to help me out by commenting below which one you would prefer. This is choice number 1 for my green. It has a print on it, but I like that green. It is kind of a softer, I've bloomed, I might be like a few days old now. I'm not as deep a green as I would have been when I was just forming my leaves. So I like this one. And again, this fabric will definitely give the overall quilt a little bit of depth and texture, which is something that I always like to add into my quilts so they don't look completely flat. Okay, so that's number 1. And then your second choice, if you don't mind helping me out, is this one. Again, it is a very small, simple pattern to give that movement. But this one is a deeper green. This is the kind of green when a flower is just blooming and the leaves are just coming on. They're their deepest green typically that they're ever going to be. And so that is this color. So which one would you use for the leaves? Number 1 or number 2? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your answers. All right, so those are our fabrics. So technically, we have 5 fabrics for this mini quilt, but really, if you have 5 quarters, 5 fat quarters or 5 fat eighths, you're probably going to have enough to do this. Because this is a small 9x9 piece, you're not going to need a huge amount of fabric unless you plan on making multiples to give them like as a gift or to use them as mug rugs in your home. All right, so that was our second page, the fabric. The next page you will see in the pattern is called our cut sheet. And our cut sheet, again, will show you the fabrics. And then over here, it tells you what you want to cut from each one of those fabrics. And then later in these next pieces, it's going to tell you which one of those pieces you're going to use. So the very next piece after our cut sheet is creating the corner 4 patch. And that's this piece right here, the corner 4 patch. Alrighty, and so that page looks like this, and it shows you that you're going to be making a square and a half square triangle. In fact, let me bring up the larger diagram of this segment block, this unit. There we go. So in this unit, you can see we have 2 half square triangles. And because this is a smaller quilt, this whole piece ends up being 3 by 3 inches. So each one of these segments is only 1.5 inches. So we're working with true miniature sizes in this quilt. And I know last year you all were asking for some of these true minis. And so I wanted to bring out our first true mini of the year for our April mini quilt for Quilt Lab. So here we have, you're going to be doing 2 squares and 2 half square triangles. And in your diagram, it will show you how they come together, what fabrics you use, all of that information. You will be making 4 of these units. And you can see here that you're using let me get my fabric sheet here. So you're going to be using fabric A. You're going to be using, I believe this is fabric C, and then fabric E. So, because I think this is the medium on the Starflower. So you're going to be using 3 of your fabrics. You're going to be making 4 of these in totals. Because you're making small pieces and seaming them, remember there is a seaming demonstration at the end. And when you seam with Build a Quilt, you do not, and I can't stress that enough, do not try and use a 1/4 inch seaming foot like you would with other quilting methods. It will mess up your sizing and your seams in the piece. There is a built-in stitch line for you to follow. You'll see that all in that diagram or in that demonstration at the end. But you will be making 4 of those pieces. Then the next part you'll be creating are your 2 types of 1/4 square triangles. Again, it's going to tell you what fabrics you need, how many you need, and how to put them together. Let me show you what those units look like. Okay, so there's 2 of them. One of you're going to be making 4 of this unit. These ends up being your side units, your north, south, east, and west units in this mini quilt. So you're going to be using 3 colors again, your dark, your light, and your background for these, okay? Very simple to do. Alrighty, and then there is another 1/4 square triangle. You're going to make 1 of these, and it is your center 1/4 square triangle. And in this one, you're only using 2 colors. You're using your light color and your dark color. And the 1/4 square triangle is also made in 2 sections. It talks about that in here, and it will show it to you in the how-to video portion. You make 1 section that looks like this. Well, you make 2 sections that look like this. And then when you put them together, they end up falling into place just like this. And why, you might ask, are you doing 2 sections for a 1/4 square triangle? Because if I started here and put this piece, then this piece, then this piece, look what happens when I come to the 4th piece. That 4th piece ends up with a Y seam right here. Yeah, we don't like Y seams. So we do 2 halves and stitch the halves together, and you get that perfect 1/4 square triangle each and every time. All right, so those are your segments that you are creating. You have your how-to videos coming up here shortly and your diagrams. Then you have a final layout diagram. It's going to show you the 3 main segments you're creating and how you lay those out and how they get stitched together. Very easy to follow. This plus this plus this is row 1, this plus row 2, this plus this row 3, and then you put your rows together. Very simple. And then, of course, the next part of the pattern that you can use and make as many copies as you want is our coloring sheet. It is the full mini quilt. You can color, figure out what you want. And here's another little thing that I know some of you like to do. Some of you, we have some subscribers here at the Quilt Lab who watch grandchildren. And I think that's great that they get to spend time with their grandmother. I think that's a wonderful thing because then those children know more about like their history and their family. I loved it. I spent lots of time with grandparents and aunts and uncles and things as I was growing up. Was fortunate to be able to do that. And so I feel like I have a real rich understanding of our family that way. Anyway, what they do with that is they print off a couple extras and give them to the grandkids with their crayons. And while grandma's doing her quilting, the kids are doing their coloring. How fun is that? Have time together and I bet you end up with a quilter in your family from them just being with you and kind of watching you do that. And I know moms or babysitters, that's a great little thing to do with that coloring sheet. In fact, you just want to make some sheets for kids to have some things to color in the car, print out some coloring sheets. It's cool. And it will help them a little bit with geometry too. When they get older, they'll remember like how those things go together. Anyway, and then finally, you have a few ending instructions, piecing instructions, one large photograph of the total diagram, and then just the general information at the end about not reproducing the pattern and things like that, and how to get a hold of us here at Build a Quilt. That's the written pattern set. Now, the next thing that's coming up is our videos for the half square triangle, the square, the quarter square triangle, and the seaming video. If you have any questions at all while you're creating your piece, please contact me at support@sewincommon.com. If it's the weekend, I might not get back to you like right away, because I usually try as soon as your message comes in, I try to read it and I try to answer it or let you know that maybe I have to answer it and get back to you tomorrow morning. If it is the weekend, it is likely you'll get a message from me saying, I'll get back to you on Monday when we're technically open again. However, if it's a quick question, like you send me a picture and you say, this fabric or this fabric, I'll just quickly say, you know, I really love this one. Because typically when you're at that stage, you're in your process. I don't want you to have to wait if you don't need to. So support@sewincommon.com. Now, if you are, again, a Quilt Lab subscriber, you've received your download information. But if you want to check out our patterns and you want to check out the mini quilt that we talked about today, it is at our website, www.mybuildaquilt.com. Over there, you can also read our blog. I only do a few blogs a year right now. I'm trying to get better at doing at least a monthly one. But as a one-person show, there's a lot to do. And so I'm trying to get that into my schedule and start doing that more regularly. But the blogs are there. There are videos there as well for some of our patterns that are out on the website as well. They're also here on the YouTube channel, so you can find them in multiple places. Excuse me. I think I'm getting a cold. But you can do that at our website. And thank you all so much for watching today. If you're new to Build a Quilt, please subscribe, like, and share. Hit the subscribe button. That way you'll find out when we have new things coming, and when I put out videos, you'll know when to join us for our Wednesday night workshop every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, or right now we're in Central Daylight Time, but 6 p.m. Central Time. We meet every Wednesday for our Wednesday workshop. And then a couple of times a month, we have our Quilt and Coffee Chat live on Friday mornings at 11 a.m. Central Time. Love to see you at both of them. So click that notification bell so that you'll know when those things come out. And please like the video if you enjoyed this information. And if you are a quilter, we'd love for you to click like and share. That's how our channel and Build a Quilt has grown the way it has. It's all because of you guys. And I appreciate you all so very much from the bottom of my heart. So until next time, everyone, like I always say, quilters are artists. Whether we're making art for daily utilitarian use or art to hang on a wall, a quilt is a beautiful piece of art. And you're the artist, so you go out and you quilt life beautiful. Bye for now, everyone. And coming up are those demonstration videos. Bye for now. Okay, so here we are at my machine camera, and the first square block that we're going to create is the half square triangle. Now we're going to go through and make the half square, the quarter square, and the square, in the hoop, and then we'll go back over under my other camera and we will talk about how we trim these, because you trim all blocks in that manner. So we'll do those all at once. You can see here I have my tools available, my scissors, my glue stick, my stylus if I need it, my seam roller, and my embroidery tape. And right here I have my 2 fabrics. So I've also loaded my file on my machine. On this particular machine, I loaded it through a USB stick. You might be able to load your files through the Wi-Fi if you have a more modern machine that can do that. So somehow you have loaded your file onto your machine and you should know how to complete that. Now today I'm going to be stitching in a black thread so that you can see it a little more easily. I have loaded my hoop with a standard wash away stabilizer, one that we would use for, say, making freestanding lace. So now I'm going to go to step 1, which is basically going to give me what I call the border outline. And you'll find that information also written in the written instructions along with the step-by-step diagrams as well. So it is just stitching out my main border. And because we are doing a square, of course that border is a square. And what it's showing us is that this finished box is going to be our finished size. Okay, when we trim it out, we'll talk about what else this box represents for us in the piecing process. Now, a half square triangle is always 2 pieces of fabric. I've chosen this yellow and this polka dot, this aqua with the light yellow polka dot. So I have those prepared. But the second step also gets stitched directly to your stabilizer, and it will give us the placement outline for our first piece of fabric, which is going to be our lighter color or our yellow fabric. So let's do that now. Now, I will give you one tip here, because this was something that my shop where I purchased my machines and I came across. I have another machine which is a embroidery only. It's not a combo machine like this one is. And I kept having problems with it not catching stitches on my straight stitch, which is basically the only stitch we use when we're piecing. And what we found out was that it actually needed a sewing bobbin case. So in this machine, because it's a combo, I have a bobbin case for embroidery and a bobbin case for sewing. The straight stitches do better if you use the sewing bobbin case rather than the embroidery bobbin case, because really all we're doing here is straight stitching like we would on a sewing machine. If you have an embroidery only machine, but that machine has a counterpart, which is a sewing machine or a combo machine, then get that sewing bobbin and check with your local dealer for all of that information if you have problems. That can be helpful. So here I'm going to take and use my glue stick. This will show you how to use that. And I'm just going to place a couple little marks right in my upper square, or triangle really, where I'm going to place my fabric. Now I can easily see and easily feel that thread line. So I'm going to lay this fabric so that I have roughly a 1/4 inch of it hanging over or coming past that line. Not a reason to get really worried about it if it's more, because you can always trim it later. Now I place that down. Now I'm ready to stitch out step 3, which is going to be the tack down of that triangle. Oops, I'm going to stop and lift my needle and my foot because my needle came unthreaded. So we'll just rethread real quick. Just a second. Sometimes that happens with machines, right? Thank goodness for auto threaders. There we go. Now we'll start again. And we're doing the tack down of the top half of the half square triangle. Very simple. The half square triangle is probably the most often used block in quilting. And so getting used to making this block will be helpful for you because you're going to end up making a lot of them in your quilting journey. In fact, all three of the blocks in our basic set today are probably the three most often used blocks in the series, or in the quilting series. Alrighty, so now I've tacked that down. If, excuse me, this was way over this line, I could remove my hoop and I could take my scissors and I could just give it a little trim. If it's not straight, it doesn't matter. Just do the best you can. Another good reason to have scissors with a serrated edge, because you're going to get a really fine cut there. But as of course I've used my rotary blade with the pinking blade, I'm good to go. And I am not going to trim the outer edges because that gets trimmed when we trim the whole thing out of the stabilizer at the end. So no need to trim here or here at this point. So now the next thing I'm going to do is lay down my second fabric. But I should tell you that with piecing in the hoop, your first piece of fabric is always laid down right side up. You also get that information in the written instructions. So if this piece were going to be the print, say that was my first piece, I would lay it down right side up every time, no matter what. Now, with a second, third, fourth, or subsequent piece of fabric, you always lay it down right side down or right side together with your other fabric. Now, if you can see here, I've laid this down and you'll see it in the picture diagram in the written instructions where just a tiny bit of my other fabric is showing. I like to make sure and do that. Then I know this is placed exactly where I need it to be for a good seam. Now I'm going to place that in here. I'm going to bring my needle down and my foot down, and I'm going to do the step 4, which is going to stitch this together on top of piece number 1. Alrighty. Now, piece number 5, or step number 5, is what we call the flip and stitch. So we're not done, obviously. We have to get this to be like this. So what I like to do there, again, is take my glue stick, give myself a little bit right in that square, and I always put my glue right on my stabilizer if possible, because then I know exactly where my boundaries are for that, and I'm not putting it out here anywhere. Now I'm going to take this bottom piece of fabric and I'm going to flip it. So easy. Now it's stuck there because of the glue. Now I can take my seam roller and I can roll my seam and give it a nice little kind of a press there to get it nice and flat. Now eventually you're going to iron these as well, but that helps for the stitch out process. Now step number 5 is to stitch this on its outer border so that it's stitched down. And we can go ahead and proceed with that. Golly, my needle came unthreaded again. Again, that's okay. That's what automatic threaders are for, to make it easy. There we go. Now we'll just go ahead and stitch out step number 5. And sometimes I just keep my fingers there to kind of help it. That's also a good time to kind of use your stylus, so not to get your fingers in there by the needle and the foot. So now technically we've stitched out our half square triangle. Congratulations, you did it if you've been sewing along with me. However, there's one more step. Step 6 will be a stitch out all the way around the block. And you might ask why. Well, a couple of reasons. One, it's going to connect these pieces that are right here at the corner between the two fabrics, or if I had multiple fabrics, it would connect them all the way around. And that box will also become our guide for trimming and our guide for sewing our squares together. You'll see that more in the trimming part of this video. So now I can, if I like, just use a stylus to hold this down here. The thing you're trying to prevent is to have your foot from catching here and flipping this back and causing problems. It's always fixable, but who wants to have to fix it if we don't need to? So you can use a stylus, or what I like to do is use my embroidery tape here. I don't put embroidery tape all the way around because it's not needed. I just put it over that point there, and then I know that that's not going to catch. Now you're going to say, oh, well, you're going to put it down there as well. I could, but because my foot is going to go around in a clockwise direction, it's not going to catch here because it's going over that fold. Here it would be coming against the fold. So you can put tape there or not. Let's go ahead and do that stitch out and I'll show you what I mean. So it's going to start up here in the corner and it's going to stitch in a clockwise direction. So I wouldn't want it to catch that. And see, it doesn't because it slides right over it because of the tape. Now, when it comes here, I don't have to worry because it's going with that fabric. It's not going to catch. Now, if it makes you a little nervous, just put a little piece of tape there until you're more confident. That's also fine. So then when we go over to trimming in a little bit, I will take this and I will peel this tape off, and then we will trim this out of the hoop. But congratulations, you just created your first half square triangle. That's how easy it is to create these squares in any size. This happens to be the 4-inch finish, but this could have been a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or any other size that you might happen to have. But in this set, we go up to 5 inches finished. So we'll talk about trimming in another part of the video. Let's move on to our quarter square triangle. Okay, so here we are at the machine and we're going to be doing the square. Now you're going to say, I know, why would we just stitch one piece down on the stabilizer and when we could just cut it and sew it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Part of the technique of piecing in the hoop is to give quilters who have never quilted and pieced before some guidelines to help them with final sewing, and to give all of us the ability to sew our quilt together without having to have a 1/4-inch foot on our sewing machine, without having to worry about accuracy when we're doing that, but without, even though we're not worrying about accuracy because all of our seam lines and things are built in, it's actually helping us to be more consistent. And consistency in our quilting is what makes our quilts really so beautiful. You know, I like to say about quilting, you can do anything you want in quilting, and don't let someone scream at you if you have like one little point that isn't exact. Perfect is the killer of joy in quilting, I think. I don't recommend you ever trying to be perfect, But what this does is helps you to be consistent so that you get everything just as it should be, and your project will come together nicely. But you won't have to worry about, oh, is my quarter inch a good quarter inch, a scant quarter inch? I've been quilting for over 50 years, and this really is going to help you with all that consistency without having to worry about it. And it gives you another thing as well. It gives you a final box so that you have that stitch guide when you go to stitch your squares together. So I'll show you more of that when we do our trimming. So here we are, we're all set up for our stitch out again. Now the square really only has two pieces. We're going to do our border just like we've done before. I've done everything on this wash away stabilizer, and I will admit this one is by far the easiest and fastest. In fact, according to my machine here, at 700 stitches a minute, this is all stitched out in a minute or less, so pretty quick. Now let's speak about speed for a little bit. I always recommend that you don't piece above 700 stitches per minute. You can do your embroidery that way and all, but quilting is not about speed. And whenever we go and start to worry about speed, high speeds, that's when we end up with more mistakes, even in this process. So I say don't go above 700 stitches a minute on your machine speed. If your machine doesn't even go that high, good. That's good. Usually I do 600 to 700 stitches a minute on my machine. I put my little bit of glue there. Now I'm going to lay my square of fabric down, and I can kind of feel where my border is. Okay, it's not exactly even on all sides, but it doesn't matter. I have plenty of fabric there for trimming. Now my second and my last piece, because I don't really have to do that basting or that stitched out border again because it's really doing it for me now. I am just going to stitch this down. This is my final stitch step for doing my square. So now all of my squares are going to be exactly the same size. That's the consistency thing, not only with your seams, but when you cut. A lot of times, oh, we think we cut everything right. And if you've been a quilter in more traditional ways, you know what I mean when I say squaring up a square. You never have to square up when you piece in the hoop. It's really nice not to have to do that. So this one is done just like that. So our square is finished. Now we're going to go over under my other camera, and we're going to talk about trimming these out. And then we'll be ready for our last little bit of our talk here on our how-to video for Build a Quilt in the Hoop, Block Basics Set 1. Okay, we're back at our machine, and now we're going to create the quarter square triangle. The quarter square triangle is basically, typically, again, two fabrics. And in this case, we're still going to use the yellow and the aqua with the yellow polka dot for my demonstration. However, there's something fun about the quarter square triangle because it can be used with up to 4 fabrics. You could do each quarter in a different fabric and have such a super scrappy look to your project. And some projects that you decide to do might call for that. Or it might call for you to 3/4 in one color and the 4th quarter in a second color. That creates a whole different look. Or it might say to create 2 in one color and the 3rd and 4th in different colors. You can really play with this square. It's very versatile. Here's the other thing about this square. Now, when you make this block, you make it in 2 parts. You are going to make 2 halves that look just like this. Here's my first half. I haven't trimmed it out of my stabilizer yet. And now we're going to create the second half, which looks just like this. Don't change anything. Don't flip your fabrics or anything like that. Do it exactly the same, because when you go to sew these together, You'll put them right sides together, sew them, and then when you open them, they come out just as they're supposed to. But I'll show you more about how to do that when we go over to the trimming section of the video. So here we are. I have my stabilizer again. Now I'm going to do my first stitch out, which is my border and my placement. This one kind of is a little different in that it has a border and a placement. And I have my fabrics here, my yellow and my aqua with my polka dot. And again, I'm stitching out in black. I am doing a 4x4 square for you in these demonstrations. If you were doing the 2x2 or the 3x3, you could fit multiples in a 5x7 hoop. Now, I will just tell you one little tip here. I'm actually using a 6x6 hoop. Brother and Baby Lock have this 6x6 hoop, and I'll take it out here in just a second so you can see how it attaches, because it is my favorite hoop for when I piece. Okay, let's take this out. See, if your Baby Lock or Brother has an attachment arm that looks like that, check with your local dealer for a 6x6 hoop. I think you'll truly love it. Okay, so here is my border. And I've got a little piece I need to trim here. My thread's doing something a little bit goofy today. I'm not quite sure what. And I'm just going to go ahead and rethread just to be on the safe side since we had a little bit of issue last time. Alrighty, so I've got my border, and you noticed it also gave me this line here, which separates my upper quarter from my side quarter. So in this one, just like with the half square triangle, I'm going to start this, and you'll see this on your placement template, is space 1 and space 2. I'm going to put my little bit of glue stick there. Now, you don't have to use glue stick, but I find it helpful. And then I have really given you generous fabric cuts here. I would rather have a little bit of waste than have some problems with not having enough fabric or something shifted and then it shifted out of place. So I always give you plenty. Now we're going to trim these, not here and here until the end, but so you're looking at this to try and place for your quarter inch. Now I can feel that. And I can actually see this one because of the black, and I can see right there's my black line. And so I know I've got a good 1/4 inch there, and I'm just going to stick that down. Now we're going to do the tack down stitch. And again, if you want to kind of lay that right in the middle and trim it at the end, that's okay too. There we go. And you can see when I trim, I will have a little bit of leftover, but honestly, like I said, I'd rather have a little bit of leftover than not enough. So first piece was right side up. Second piece is going to be laid right side down, but before, well, I don't have to do that yet. So let's do this. I'm going to lay it right side down. And here's the trick when doing the 1/4 square triangle. How do I lay this triangle so that when I flip it, it turns out like this? You lay it just exactly on top of the other one in the same direction. So don't lay it like that. That would be wrong. Okay. Lay it on top exactly how you see the yellow one or your first piece of fabric, whatever color that is. And I'm going to lay it here, and you can see, I see a tiny bit of my yellow peeking out, and I'm talking about just a sliver of your bottom fabric should stick out. Okay. Now we've got that there, and we're going to stitch that down. And you can see what happens when we flip it. Okay. Now I'm going to place a little glue right there, and I'm actually going to bring this out a little bit, and I'm going to do my flip. And see how nicely that flips right into place. Super easy. So I'm going to stick that down with the glue. And now I'm going to bring in my seam roller and roll right on my seam. Now you can finger press. Here's my one tip or scenario about finger pressing is that when you finger press, you tend to stretch your fabric. So when you use a seam roller, it's not doing that. It's not pulling them in opposite directions like your fingers can. That's why I like the seam roller best. And now I see why my piece keeps coming unthreaded, because I keep pulling it out when I'm taking my hoop in. Alrighty, so here we go. We're going to do now step 4, which is going to tack our second piece down. Now I'm using my fingers there. Here's a good place to use your stylus or your stiletto if you'd like to do that. Now again, we're going to do step 5. So there's only 5 steps in each half. And that is going to be to stitch down our final box. And just so that you can see what I was talking about before, I will go ahead and place a piece of my embroidery tape right here. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and place a piece of my embroidery tape on this join as well, just so you can see that you can do that easily, because it's just going to peel off at the end. And then we will do the final stitch out there. And then we'll have our 2 halves. And when we do the trimming in the last section, you'll see how they come together. But the reason that you need to do this particular block in 2 pieces is because of the flip and stitch method. Let me show you what I mean. Let me grab my little one that I did in a hurry. So if I did, there we go. If I did this one and flipped it, and then I came over and stitched this one down and flipped it, look what happens when I would go to do the 4th one. It would end up with an interior, kind of like a Y seam almost, or that interior seam, and you couldn't flip it. So by doing it in 2 pieces, you don't have to worry about that. And it really is not, doesn't add extra difficulty. It just basically adds one more tiny step. And here we are. We're done with our second half of the quarter square triangle. And so when we go to do our trimming, we'll have these 2 together. Let me fold this down. And we'll end up with our whole quarter square triangle. So let's move on to stitching out our square. And I'll tell you why we're going to stitch out a square, because there is a really good reason. Stay tuned. Hi everybody, so this is Diana, and I'm here at my sewing machine to show you how to sew your pieces together without getting that stitch line to show. Now you can see here I just have 2 little half square triangles. I've used the pin method up here at the point to make sure they're lined up, and I just have 1 clip here. Now what I do first is when I put this in my machine, I get my needle right to where the line would be, right on that stitch line, okay? Then I come over to my machine's tools, and I take my width down by 1, and that's all. Now I'm going to put it back up, and I'm going to take you back over to here and let you see that. Okay, so watch the needle, how that moves. I'm going to move it now. See how it just moved 1 place to the inside, or I guess as you're looking at it, it would be to the left. That would be to the inside. Now I'm going to place my needle down, and I can go ahead and remove my clip because this is a small piece, and I can sew right down. And I have my stitch length at 1.8, and you can see now that I've already done a few stitches, it is still right 1 click in. It's not directly on top of it, and so I should, when I'm done, be able to finish and not have that black line sewn, and you just follow it all the way down. Now I'm going to cut my thread and bring it out, and I will open this up and bring it right back over so you can see it. So there it is, opened up. Now you might see a little of the black in this case because I used that marker, but when I'm just going to open up my seam in the back and hold it open for you. But you can see when I hold it open, that's just a little piece of thread that I can pull out of there. That's gone. And now you don't see it at all. You don't see any of the black thread, which I used for demonstration purposes, but you don't see any of my original embroidery thread from making the patchwork itself. And that is just by moving that needle one space and one space only. And again, I always stitch these with a 1.8 or a 2.0 stitch length so that it really holds these together when you go and open them up. And when I open it up here, you can see the line all the way down on both sides. And that's what you should be able to do. So I hope that you found that helpful. That was a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. And now we'll move on with the rest of the Q&A for today.